Hi guys, welcome back to another video on RabbitMQ. In the last video we looked at some of the basics of RabbitMQ and its common terminology. In this video we're going to write our very first simple program using RabbitMQ. In this video we'll be using .NET and C#, but if you've viewed the previous video in Python, this content will be the exact same except using .NET. So please feel free to skip this video if you want to. Before we start writing our code, we'll give a brief introduction on what we are trying to achieve. All we are trying to achieve is to publish a message into our RabbitMQ broker from our producer and then consume that message from a consumer. So we will have a producer and a consumer. So the consumer in this video will consume its messages from a queue. So like we discussed in the previous video, the queue is like the post box for the consumer. So here's our queue. And the consumer will simply listen to messages from this queue. We have to give the queue a name, and in this example we'll call our queue letterbox. In RabbitMQ we can never publish a message directly to a queue. It has to go through an exchange. In this very simple example, the exchange is not that important, so we can just use the default exchange, which is represented by a blank string. So the producer will push a message onto the default exchange. Default exchange will then push that message into our letterbox queue. And finally, as we've seen, the consumer will consume the message from the letterbox queue. So now we're going to write our first RabbitMQ producer and consumer. And we're going to use C# for this. I'm using Visual Studio Code here, but you can use whatever IDE you want to use. Visual Studio and Writer are other good choices for C# development. Created a new folder here called First RabbitMQ App. And the first thing I'm going to do is create two subfolders in this, one for our producer and one for our consumer. So we're going to open a terminal window and then make a consumer directory. And we're going to do the same for our producer. We'll write our producer first, so let's cd into that directory. And we want to create a new .NET project in here. So we'll type .NET new, and we want it to be a console app. So let's type console. So we can see this has created a new .NET console app in our producer folder. So let's start by clearing out what's in the program.cs. And we can start writing our producer code. So the first thing we need to add is the top level using statements for the dependencies we're going to use. So using system.text. And we also need to use a RabbitMQ client library, so we can install that again from the command line. So we can type .NET add package and then RabbitMQ client or RabbitMQ.client. Press enter and it will install the RabbitMQ client package for us. And then we can add that to our using statement. RabbitMQ.client. So the first thing we need to do is create a connection. So to do that, we create a new connection factory and give it the host name of where our RabbitMQ broker is running. So var factory is equal to new connection factory. And then host name, in our case, is running on localhost. If your RabbitMQ broker is running somewhere else, you can add a different host name here. And then we want to create a new connection. So we can type var connection equals factory dot create connection. I will add a using in front of that, so the connection is disposed when we're finished with it. And then we want to create a channel. So again, using var channel and equals connection dot create model. And that will create our channel that we can use now. So next thing we want to do is we want to declare the queue that we're going to use. So again, we use the channel to create our queue. So we'll type channel and then queue declare. We need to give it a queue name and we'll call it letterbox. And then we also need to pass some other parameters into this that we don't know about yet, but we will discuss in later videos. So durable false, exclusive, false as well, auto delete, false too, and arguments is null. So let's just tidy that up a little bit. Okay, so now we've declared our queue. Let's create a message we want to publish into the RabbitMQ broker. So we'll say var message, and we'll just say this is my first message. And then we want to encode that. So we'll just say the encoded message is equal to encoding and UTF-8 get bytes, and pass in the message. So now we have an encoded message, and finally we just want to publish this message. So we use the channel, not the connection, and we're going to use a basic publish. So the first parameter of this is the exchange we're publishing to. We always have to publish to an exchange, but in this simple example we can just publish to the default exchange, and we do that by adding a blank string here. And then the routing key will be the name of our queue, so letterbox. And then we pass null and also the body, so the encoded message. So we can see the basic property is null and the encoded message then as the body. So that is basically our producer written. We'll just finish up by typing console.writeLine just to indicate that we've published something. We'll say published message, and then we'll give the message body, so message. And that is our producer written. So let's go out of the producer and let's cd back into our main folder, and let's go into our consumer. Again, we want to create another C# project here, so we'll type .NET new console. And this will create a new console app in the consumer folder. And again, we want to install that RabbitMQ client library. So we can do that again, .NET add package RabbitMQ client, and that will add the package to our consumer project as well as our producer project. So once that's added, let's add some code in the program file. A lot of the code will be very similar. We need to create a connection factory, a connection, a channel, and a queue. So let's copy that. Delete the boilerplate code. And then we also need to copy in our top level using statements, as well as another one that we'll be using later. So using RabbitMQ.client.events. Okay, so once we've done all this, we have our connection, our channel, and our queue. The code gets a little bit different from the producer. So we need to write code to consume events off the channel. So let's write var consumer, and we want that equal to a new eventing basic consumer. And I pass the channel into this. And then we want to define the callback that gets called when we receive a message. So consumer.received. And then when we receive a message, what do we want to do? So we just want to get the body of the message. So var body equals ea.body.toArray. So that will be the byte encoded body. And then we want to decode this. So var message is equal to encoding UTF-8 get string and pass in the body. And finally, we just want to print out the message. So console.writeLine. And we can say message received, and then just print out what the message received was. Okay, so now we've defined the callback for when we receive a message. Next thing we have to do is just consume the messages. So add the call to channel.basicConsume. Define the queue, which is what we defined in the producer, which is letterbox. Auto ACK. So whether we should auto acknowledge the message, we'll say true for now. And also the consumer. So the consumer we defined above. And then just so the program doesn't exit, we'll just say console.readKey. So this code should be the code for our consumer. And we also have the code for our producer defined. So if we take a very quick look in the RabbitMQ management client and the queues, we can see that we don't currently have any queues defined. So let's run our consumer to start consuming messages off the queue, and this consumer should also create the queue for us. So let's just write .NET run. So our consumer should be running there. We could have added a console write line to say consuming here, but if we go back and look at the RabbitMQ management client, we can see that the letterbox queue has been created. So let's open another terminal window. And let's cd into our producer, and let's run the producer code. So .NET run, and we can see here we published a message. This is my first message, like we expected. And then back in the console window running our consumer, we can see that the message has received. And if we run the producer one more time, we should receive a second message in our consumer. If we stop the consumer and publish a message with the producer will send the message onto the RabbitMQ broker, but nothing will be there to consume it. And we can see that in the RabbitMQ management client. So we can see here on our letterbox queue, we have a message sitting there ready to be consumed. If we go back and start our consumer again, we should receive a message as soon as it starts. So we didn't publish it there, but that received the message that was already sitting on the queue. And then if we go back one more time and look at the management UI, we can see that this letterbox message has disappeared. So thanks for watching this video, guys. If you liked it, please subscribe to the channel and stick around for more content on RabbitMQ.